Hey guys, what's up? What's up? Hey, so look. I wanted to start out by just super quickly talk about the thing that we're doing in Seraphim. I should put the slide up. It's like it's actually a presentation. So in Seraphim, we are in the middle of readjusting our focus from like a barbarian war focus to a knowledge-based focus. So we are starting to look at all the things that we do in Seraphim, and we're trying to find ways to up our skill level and our education level. So, we have a number of training programs going on. This is going to be my one plug for this evening. If you are interested, now that migration is a thing, we absolutely have a space for you on 880. Please reach out, and I can put you in touch with one of our interviewers to see if it would be a good match. But definitely, if one of the things that you're trying to do is understand the game better, to become a better player, we have programs in place where we are ready to train you to have some fun. That's going to be my one. That is going to be my one plug this evening. And I will say before I get started, a big shout out to Magnum PI. Magnum PI made the thumbnail, not the ugly thing that you're looking at that I had, but a sweet looking one. So thank you to the meme master general himself. So, the way that I want to kick this off is we're going to be talking about how to gear out commanders. I realize it's going to take more than one video to do it. I'm going to try and keep them, to about the 20 or 30 minute mark max. I'll try and get some questions in. So, if you do have questions during the video, please put them in the chat. And I will try my best to answer them at an appropriate time. So we're looking at how to gear out commanders, and what I wanted to start out with this evening is basically an overview. What do we do when we first get a commander? And if you ever notice, there's always people in every single guild that kind of they look at a commander for the first time, and just like good players, they reach out to other members of the community or other members of their guild, and they go, hey, how do I gear out this comm? Like, how do I gear out Plasma? How do I gear out Stella? And there are people in your guild and in other guilds that have trouble with this question, and then there are people that seem to have answers immediately. Whether or not they've ever played the commander, they have an answer. And one reason that they have an answer could be that they have read somebody else's answer in the past. But another reason is that they could be applying what I have called a lot of the time the basic strategy of the game. How you unlock the game is called the theory of it. I'm from a music theory background. It's what I went to school for. So to me, I call everything commander theory or gear theory or skills theory. So looking at there are indicators that you could look at in the game that kind of reveal what you should do with certain commanders. So it's my goal that during, I think it's probably going to be about 3 videos or 3 live stream sessions, and I'll try and do them at the same time each week. It's my goal that over the course of these 2 or 3 sessions that we have, that I can pass along some of the knowledge that I've gained from people who have taught me how to play the game. Because there's a difference between just playing the game or asking for help with the game and knowing how to play the game. So really, that's what we're going to be focusing on this evening. So the first thing that you want to do when you are looking at which commander you're gearing up, like let's take a commander. Let's take a commander to start. Let's take. You know what? Let's take Golem. Golem is a comm that isn't really in the meta today, but he is someone that has been hugely popular in previous metas. So, and he's a relatively straightforward comm, so he's a good one for us to start out with. So, every single commander has a story that they want to tell, or has a particular use. Some commanders could be more widely utilized than others, but it's important that when you look at gearing out your commander, that you apply gear towards that commander that assists in those situations where you would use him in the preferred manner. So it works, it supports the story of that commander. So we're going to start out a little bit big this evening, and when I look at Golem, or when I look at any other commander, the first thing that I like to do is I like to take a look at the skills. And and those skills will tell us a story as to what we should use the commander for. So in the case of Golem, his first skill is a 20% hit chance. It triggers before the next action. Until next action of the initiator, attack increases by percentage. This is a fairly straightforward skill, and we're beginning to open up the chapter on this commander, and it starts to talk about attack. So already I'm thinking this is a commander that's meant to do damage. I move on to Crush, 40% chance to trigger. This time attack will hit, and attack will increase by, again, in percentage. So this again speaks to a damage-dealing commander. And the third skill is always going to be your Awakening. That's not something that you can necessarily utilize to help you to tell the main aspect of the story of the commander, but it is something that you could utilize to support other skills, and in that we will have to take a look at that. So everything that I'm looking at here, and we'll go a little bit more in depth, everything that I'm looking at here tells the story of doing damage, more and more damage. So already I have in my mind that while there are multiple paths an aircom can take, right? Because an aircom happens to have the capability to tank or to do damage. And so those are two separate roles. While an aircom can fulfill either one of those a lot of the time, based on the base stats of the unit, and this is an air commander. But due to the fact that all of these skills point towards doing damage, increasing attack, I'm thinking that the application that would support this commander the best is one of a damage dealer. That's good to keep in the back of your head. So that's a very broad look. Then, once you take that broad look at a commander, and by the way, some commanders, it might be a little bit more difficult on first gaze, like what exactly they're used for. Like, if we, just very briefly, I will continue with Golem for the rest of the evening, but, very briefly, if we start to look at, say, like Lilith's skills are more ambiguous. It's a little bit less clear what role Lilith serves. So, for example, let's go and take a look at Lilith. She's got Light Veil, chance to trigger before next action until the initiator's next attack. The Light Veil is active. The Light Veil helps the initiator absorb damage. The total amount of absorbed damage when activated is related to 2% of the initiator's total HP. So from here, it looks like, okay, that's kind of a tanky roll. And then Sleep Bomb, of course, chance to trigger. The target of an attack this turn skips their action. Well, that doesn't speak to the same story that is absorbing and taking hits, right? While these different skills might play into each other, and they will play into each other for when we start to use the commander, at a high level, these are two different objectives. One is to be able to absorb damage, to tank, and then the other is a misdirect or a disable skill. So that it becomes a little bit more difficult to figure out when you're looking at Lilith first glance when compared to Golem. Golem's story is a stronger story. It's easier to figure out what's going on. Both of his skills speak to damage. Whether or not you're able to right off the cuff figure out what that story is for that commander, that's really that's just something to keep in the back of your head. Whether or not you're ready off the cuff to discern what that story is for that commander, you would move on at this point. It's really just something to hold in the back of your head, and we come back to it as we start to pick apart a little bit the skills more and see what stats they're used for. So it might become clear. If it's not clear now what the commander's story is, it will be, or what their role is, it will become clear down the road. So that's the first aspect. So the second aspect, this leads me into a a more detailed dissection of what the skills are. So we know the skills are about dealing damage, but I'm mainly on the lookout on my next pass through reading the skills. I'm mainly on the lookout to, does this comm have a sure hit skill? A sure hit skill is a skill that when it procs, it will hit the enemy regardless of accuracy. And the reason that this is really the first thing that I look for in stats or in the skills is that we're going to have to start to target some stats in order to support the story or the role that the commander has. Any stats that you can negate, anything that you could just cross right off the list at the beginning of the exercise, it gives you slots in gear and it gives you slots in gems down the road to use for other stats. So like if this character has a sure hit skill, then I know I don't have to put accuracy on the commander. So the first skill, Relentless Bombardment, is not a sure hit skill. It says until the next action of the initiator, attack increases by 104%. That's a buff. Awakening is never a sure hit skill. I know about that. I can move on to the second one. 40% chance to trigger before next action. This time attack will hit. Anytime you see that attack will hit, that's the terrible Chinese translation of this is a sure hit skill, this skill cannot miss. Now, so we do have a sure hit skill on Golem, so that tells me right away, theoretically, based on what I just said, that I am not going to have to put any accuracy on the commander whatsoever. However, before you make that ultimate leap, it's important to take a look at what percentage that skill trigger is for your sure hit skill. Crush is a 40% trigger rate. Honestly, 40% for me is great. If it were something like, if it were a lower percentage, like Flare has heat-seeking missile, Flare is a 20%. For Flare, that's not enough for me, honestly, to make a completely accuracy, a build without accuracy as a beginner. Later on, when you get into some advanced setups, you'll get to a point where you will know how to hedge your bets, and there are different things that you could do in order to bump up skill trigger rates, and there's some of them are related to gems, which you all know about, some of them also hulls, but there are also ways that you could use specific troop types in order to give a buff to your skill trigger rate. At any rate, Flare has a 20%. To me, that's not enough. Golem has a 40%. I would absolutely feel no problems with putting gear on this Golem and not putting any accuracy on him. So that's great. The next thing that I'm going to look at is, especially because this is an attack comm, I want to know, will this commander's skills crit? Critical attack at its base will double the normal attack damage, excuse me. But there are some damage dealing pieces of gear like Eye of Abyss, right, total crit damage, and also Maguel, which gives extra crit damage. So there are these pieces of equipment that buff crit damage. If your skills do not support crit, then it is, again, just like putting accuracy on it, kind of. I mean, it becomes a quote-unquote waste. Now, your commander many, many times will still have the capability to do crit damage just on their normal attack, but it's good to know when you are building out your equipments for the commander. One of the most important things is you want to build in stats that increase your skills. So knowing whether or not the skill can crit is important. In general, what you're looking for are opportunities where the commander either does normal attack damage or gets a buff. If they get a buff, then they're still going to do their normal attack. Everything for crit relates to whether or not they get a normal attack. when you have a turn, when your tile goes off for one of your slots goes off, two things happen. First, it gets a roll to trigger skills, and it also gets, as long as there is no skill that replaces its normal attack, it then hits the enemy slot right across from it. That damage from that hit direct to the slot can crit. But there are certain skills that will negate the capability to crit. Or they will negate the capability to do what's called normal attack damage. So, I mean, Golem, again, is super easy because he has a buff, and then he has a sure hit skill, which does normal attack damage, but it is buffed because the attack score is buffed. But if you look at someone like Plasma, Plasma has two skills that do damage, and of course he does his normal attack as well, once per slot. However, if you look at his skills, energy transfer does damage when he dodges when the enemy attacks him. That's direct damage. It's not a normal attack, so it cannot crit. And again, the Quantum Blast does damage when his slot dies, and then it does direct damage. Once again, that cannot crit. It is not part of a normal attack. So he would be better served by building in stats that serve his skills rather than stats that buff his normal attack. There's also like King. Like King's attack, if he hits with it, he does crit normally because it's his normal attack damage. But if you read it goes, if normal attack is dodged this time, deal, right now I have 265% normal damage to target. So if the attack is dodged, it deals direct damage. So building out extra crit damage on King is not as effective as building out extra attack on King. So once you determine whether or not your comm skills can crit, you are able to either cross off a stat on the list as being ineffective at building, or you're able to know, hey, if I have the opportunity, building in some extra crit damage is going to be important. Once you know whether or not your comm has sure hit capability and you're ready to rely on it, and you know whether or not your skills can crit, then you're going to want to take a look, honestly, and just see which statistics are mentioned in the skills and kind of drill into it, and that will help to inform you what pieces of equipment to prioritize. Because again, your best usage of a commander lies in getting the most out of them, and in general, the skills on commanders are very, very powerful. And anytime you can feed into that skill and buff that skill, it will generally result in more favorable results in the battle. So, to recap, we took a look at the story of the commander. We found out that Golem talks all about damage, all about attack. Then we took a look at the skills to see, number one, does he have a sure hit skill? And he does, so we know that we could negate accuracy later on. Number two, does he have skills that crit? Do his skills crit? Yes, his skills crit. So we can look at increased crit damage as an option. And now we're going to take a look at what stats build into Golem. So, very simply here, I mean, you could see it in big old letters, in tiny letters, it mentions attack each time, right? So attack increases by 104, and attack increases by 108. And that's simply because of the level that I have on those skills. So we will, when we take a look at gear, we are going to want to look, now that, I mean, this is cut and dry, the skills support offense, you can you can now start to take a look at your different slots, see what you have available, and see what will work for the comm. So I generally, look, I mean, off the top of my head, I hear attack, and I know I don't need any accuracy on this comm, so Titans are going to be your best option. Pay no attention to the gems. We will do gems another time. So because I don't need any accuracy at all, and I don't want to tank, just for this commander, my option, I don't want to tank. I want to do damage dealing. I know that I'm going to go for 2 Titans. And then from headset, you have a couple of options. Generally, I mean, you have to use what works for you. You could build attack in here, or with Golem, because you know that crit damage is impactful, you could build in crit damage. However, while this headset gives you crit damage, you have to weigh this kind of against what your other options are. So, like, in general, people ask this question all the time. Should I run Eye of Abyss, or should I run Devastation Helmet? In general, when gear has multiple stats attached to them, or multiple positive stats attached to them, they are not as effective as gear that prioritizes one beneficial stat. Like, for example, Rabbit Ear Headband has attack and it has strength and weaken effect. At plus 35, it's 45 attack. Devastation Helmet at plus 39 is 196 attack. It's not... There's no contest, right? So, when I look at... Without getting, completely into the math, when I look at Eye of Abyss, it's very easy to note, like, hey, there are 2 beneficials versus the Devastation Helmet, which has 1 beneficial. In general, also, when you build out for a damage comm, the ratio that you need between attack and crit damage buff is an extremely large ratio. You need so much more attack than damage, than extra crit damage. And in fact, like, when it first starts out, it's at a ratio of like 31 to 1. When you start to get into buffs above the 600 range, then it starts to get closer to 7 to 1. So, in general, your attack is going to do more, increased attack is going to do more for your damage than crit damage will. So for this case, I'm gonna take, well, let's take this one. I should have been comparing these two because they're the same level. I would take the Devastation Helmet. Because the skills crit, Magwell is a great option for Golem. It gives a ton of crit damage, which is important. Of course, we do have the new pants. The new pants which give attack and crit, but one thing that's super important to note is that crit is different from crit damage. Total crit is crit chance. So while this might look like a great piece of gear with plus 200 crit chance, the stats on air they already automatically crit once you fill out your research. So because of this, I'm really comparing the plus 80 attack to the plus 200% crit damage. And for this piece of gear, they stacked on a lot more crit damage rather than when we were comparing the Eye of Abyss and the Devastation Helmet. So it is safe in this case to add some extra crit damage. And in fact, you're gonna need some crit damage, and you could get that from gear, and you could get that from other places, of course. But in this case, this much extra crit damage will do better for you. When it comes to damage dealers, then when we're talking about chest gear, a lot of the times the chest gear, very often the chest gear becomes like a last piece of gear that you figure out. So really you just have to look at what you have available and either what will help them out or what won't hurt them or what is of greatest value to you. When you're building out an offensive comm, you want to prioritize. I mean, number one, you need to make sure that they hit. So accuracy is important, but of course, attack is important, and crit damage. We're primarily looking for those things here. When we start to talk about defense, as long as you're facing the same tier or lower, then you have a chance to, then you have a complete chance to dodge. One tier, if you're facing one tier higher, they have 40% chance to hit you, and if you're facing 2 tiers higher, it's 100%. So in those cases, if you're punching up above your tier, it doesn't really make sense to go for some dodge. But if you're not punching above your tier, then it might make sense, especially if you're running an infantry comm or if your commander is awakened, and that's a completely other story, to try and get out of taking damage at all by building in some dodge. And you can help that with gems and the like. But in general, what we're looking at for chest is what could give you the most side benefits. And it's pretty hard to go wrong here. In general, I will find all things being equal, I will run Black Knight. And the reason that I'll run Black Knight, I should use 30, because there we go. Most of my gear is 30. The reason I'll use Black Knight is it allows me to use the same gear set for tile cleaning on server with tier suppression or the like. Otherwise, if I'm going for hitting at my level or above, then really, if I'm going my level or above, I want to start to look at what will build in the most defensive stats. So I might look at Armor of Tyrant, and honestly, I know a lot of people run Ignore Defense, but if they don't, then this is very good. You know, or Shadow is one of the great all-around gear pieces, or if I'm fielding air, you know, Creator is a great, well-balanced gear piece as well. So that's Golem. And that's pretty easy. All of his skills prioritize attack, right? And he wants to do damage. So I'm looking at, and he has a sure hit. So I'm looking at stacking attack. I'm looking at stacking a little bit of crit damage. And I'm not worried about accuracy. And then from the chess piece, I want to get some defense stuff on there. That's him, and that's pretty easy. Let's go for a commander that maybe doesn't have some accuracy. Or doesn't have a short hit skill, rather. Let's go for this guy. Okay. So we'll go through Hoodoo. I'll run through this a little bit quickly, and then I'll open it up if people got questions. So, look, the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to take a look at his skills and see if we can kind of tell the story of this commander. So, Chain Blast. Okay, 40% chance to trigger before next attack on this turn if the target is hit. Not the target will be hit if the target is hit, and a row of enemies is dealt damage. Damage will be 79.5% of normal attack. What this means is if you hit the enemy with your normal attack that turn, then the first row will be hit. That's very difficult to decipher, but we know that over time and experience with him. Death Rattle, 100% chance to trigger once all enemy troops in an area are killed. Other enemy troops will be dealt 54% damage equal to HP of that troops who was killed. Attack cannot be greater than 200% of activator's normal attack damage. So this is a different story that he tells, and it seems like it's talking about doing a lot of damage, but it's not completely clear, at least to me, you know, if I were to first look at this comm, like, what is the application of this comm? It's a utility comm, but it's not exactly clear, although it seems like he likes to do damage. So, digging into his skills a little bit more, so Chain Blast, 40% chance to trigger before next attack on this turn if the target is hit. So, looking to see if this is a sure hit skill. It's not a sure hit skill. It does trigger if the target is hit. So already I know that it's important for Hoodoo to hit the target, So unless Death Rattle has a sure hit skill, then we need accuracy. Death Rattle, 100% chance to trigger once all enemy troops in an area are killed. And that means troops in the slot. That's, again, a translation fail. I don't even need to go on. This happens when troops are killed. It doesn't say that you will hit the troop. So, Hoodoo does not have a sure hit skill. I can't knock accuracy off the list, and it's becoming a little bit more clear now what the story of Hoodoo is, in that he relies on killing a slot. So now I'm going to take a look. Do these skills crit? And again, so Chain Blast talks about damage will be 79.5% of attacks, so the Chain Blast damage does not crit. However, it's based on if your normal attack hits, and that is based on accuracy, and that is also based on, and that also takes crit damage into account. So this particular skill cannot crit on the off slots. On any of the slots, it happens after the attack. Death Rattle, 100% chance to trigger, blah, blah, blah. 54% damage, equal the HP of that troops who was killed earlier. Attack cannot be 200% of activator's normal damage. Again, this happens after the hit, and it doesn't crit. But it's based on the damage done when you do normal attack on the enemy. And when that happens, you can crit. So because of that, even though Death Rattle can't crit and Chain Blast can't crit, and this is one of the reasons why this is a confusing commander, is that he still needs some crit damage. So we're going to be looking for opportunities to put in crit damage. However, crit damage is not the most important thing for him. Depending on it, accuracy is more important for him. If you do not hit, you cannot do any crit damage, right? So I'm starting to become more clear on what his story is. He likes to kill stacks. When he kills stacks, he does damage to other stacks. So what we're going to want to be able to do, it seems like, is do massive damage. So it seems like this commander is not a defensive commander. He is an offensive commander. He's an offensive commander that needs help to hit. And he wants to do a ton of damage. So there's different ways that you could get your accuracy. Accuracy is going to be his number one concern. Then we're going to worry about attack. Then we're going to worry about crit damage. So there's a number of ways that you could get your accuracy. However, keep in mind that when you go up against a commander that might dodge, they might be running Awakening. And when they run Awakening, you have to assume that that commander has the capability to run over 600% dodge as a buff. Now, if they're infantry, that means that they're going to also have the 240 based on their research, right? And in fact, for very high-end infantry, look at T7, they have 290. So 290 plus 600, you're already dealing with upwards of 300 dodge, and that's before they even get a single piece of gear on. Excuse me. So because of that, in today's meta, when you have a commander that needs to hit, you need to go big on accuracy, and in my honest opinion, starting to worry about Apocalyptors. Apocalyptors is a side thing. You should be able to hit without the Apocalyptors. I would still go here for the Titans. I would look down the road for opportunities to get maybe accuracy gems on the Titans, but I would rather have the attack, because keep in mind what Hoodoo needs to do is Hoodoo needs to kill a slot. He needs to do a tremendous amount of damage to do that. From the headpiece, I go Mini Death Star. Mini Death Star is just about your best option for accuracy. I understand it reduces your attack, and that's why a lot of people shy over it. But honestly, if you look at it, it reduces my attack at plus 36. It's reducing it by 36.8%. Honestly, you could get a single attack gem on there, and you negate that loss. If you start to get, like, if you start to gear them out with Titans, you're doing a ton of attack anyway. So the loss from attack is not such a big deal. However, if you were to start to look at, look, this is 230%. So if you were to start to look at, well, instead of Titans, let's go to Apocalyptors, he would go down from 300 attack to 120. And let's say I did 2 Apocalyptors, I would gain 80% accuracy. This single gear piece has plus 230% accuracy. To me, you're only tying one of your arms behind your back by passing up a Mini Death Star in today's meta. From there, again, I'm going to do chest last. I always end up doing chest last. Now, for here, it's going to depend completely on what what your competition is like, and this is something you will know. Like, are you competing at a base level? Are you competing at an elevated or a spender level? Are you competing at a millionaire level? Probably not. Like, how good is your research, right? So all of these things matter, because now you're going to have to make a decision, which is how well can you hit? How easily can you hit? Now, in general, walkers can play into their natural offensive stat bonus from research, which is accuracy. If you were going to run T11 infantry on here, you might have to go into Voltars. But if you're running walker and you're not hitting, like, if you're not hitting someone who's like way above you in level, then you might be able to consider going Maduel here. I've even seen some people start to look at dodge at the higher end, like going Nixa on here. It's all about what you're going to need in that situation. But if I had to pick one piece of gear for Hoodoo to play, especially because now he is such a utility commander, I would prioritize accuracy all the way. I want to make sure that I hit, and I will rely on some gems for some extra punching power. I will rely on my Titans for punching power, and I'll use a hull that has some crit damage in order to cover that. It's simply that in today's meta, it's not an option to beat dodge with anything but a ton of accuracy. And then from here, honestly, I'm in the same story that I was with Golem. It would be best if stuff didn't hit him, so I might want to take a look at it, building in a little bit of dodge here. But honestly, I think that, again, a Tyrant for building out a utility Hoodoo is pretty good. Otherwise, of course, you've got the Shadow. And again, it's really about what you have on the chest. There are very few bad options. Yeah, I mean, look. You could look at this stuff and you could start to build in additional options. Like, I mean, you could go Body of Phoenix, but it's, best, and you kind of have to think about this when you think about how you're going to apply the commander. You know best how you're going to use the commander. The most important aspect is, and I've been keeping an eye on this chat. I don't think I really see any questions. I do see some corrections. The corrections that people made are correct, so do pay attention to them. So at this point, because I don't see any questions in the chat, I'm going to draw it to a close. Again, the most important thing with how you start out with how to gear out a commander is you look to try and decipher what that commander's story is, what their role is, what you're going to use them for. Then you start to look at what their skills do, whether or not they have a sure hit skill, whether or not their skills can crit. then you start to look at what story do the skills tell you? What are you going to be using the commander for? What are you able to cross off the list as far as stats go? And then you just build out your comm piece by piece. I think that next time what we will do is, I realize that these are all completely attack builds, so I think next time when we get together, I'll do a little bit of gems, but also I'll go over some defensive builds, what you can do with that. And I'll post an announcement when we're next going to do this. But I want to thank you for joining me here tonight. This new focus that my guild is taking, that we're going into this knowledge-based focus, and we're really interested in being able to unlock the mysteries of the game. So I definitely appreciate you coming along with me on this ride.